It is great to bring in the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs, Brett Veach, Mount Carmel's own. Congratulations on, once again, another trip to the Super Bowl. We're making this talk leading into the game, an annual event.
Yeah, appreciate it, Steve. It's great to be on the show. And, listen, it's been another great journey, and it's always a lot of fun. Never take it for granted. It's a hard thing to do, but certainly gonna enjoy the weeks leading up and looking forward to the game.
No question. Look, this is a league where there's a lot of changeover, and there's been a lot of changeover on your offensive line. In fact, a guy that used to be on your offensive line I see almost every day, that's Stefan Wisniewski. Donovan Smith was brought in this year. He ended up making 9 starts for you, but he's on that left side. What kind of addition did he end up being for you this year?
Yeah, look, Steve, we always find a way to get a Penn State guy on the roster
That's right.
for the big moments in the big games, right? No, listen, he's been great, and last season, coming off Super Bowl win, like every year, you have a lot of work to do, but we had a little bit more of a difficult task last offseason. We lost both tackles and able to sign Juwan Taylor quickly out of free agency and got through the draft. And, always want to make sure we're doing what we need to do for the quarterback and keep him protected. And had a chance to get in contact with Donovan and bring him in here. And needless to say, it was a huge addition for us, and a guy that's played that long in the league. And he's logged a bunch of starts. But just a great person, brings a lot of character and personality to the practice field, every day. Again, like I said, one of those guys just has so much experience. He's a great mentor for the young guys, and, he's a big reason, why we were able to win those 3 playoff games, and getting him back healthy at the right time was, certainly good fortune for us.
You brought up something in that answer I thought that was interesting. You talked about the character of somebody, what they bring to the table, not just as a football player. How important is that evaluation for you as you're putting, quote, a team together?
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of the most important things. I mean, in this league, there's a lot of parity, and most of these games get decided by 2 or 3 points, and you're always going to have, in every season, doesn't matter how they end. I mean, we've been fortunate to have some successful seasons here, but in all of those seasons, we face a lot of adversity. So I think, just having those guys that understand it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, understand it's going to be tough at points, but just keep that positive outlook on things and come to work every day and be the same person, continue to do the hard work, and, it just enables not just a position group, but the team as a whole to just handle adversity. And you're going to get hit with a lot of adversity here. And the one thing I'm super proud about this team is, they always under a microscope. We're a type of team now that when we travel, we're the team's A game on their schedule, and have to take their best shot week in and week out, and guys learn from it and stay the path, and I think it makes us tougher at the end of the season.
You put a team together. Something that was frustrating in watching Kansas City this year were the number of surprising drop passes. What hasn't happened in the postseason? You haven't dropped any passes. When you signed these guys, you didn't expect that to happen. How frustrating was it for you at times to see guys that what they're capable of, and they had that inconsistency, to now see it become consistent?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of both of those things. It's always, listen, we're going out there every week to play our best, and, it's frustrating when, some weeks that, those things happen, and, but I'll say this, even though there was some frustration and there was some disappointment throughout the course of the season, I don't think any of us here on the staff, and certainly the players in the locker room, I think that, the ability was always there, and all these mistakes were correctable. That was the one thing that we just kept our eye on the future, and just accepted it and used it as an opportunity to learn from it. And I think looking back on this season, probably our worst performance of the year was the Christmas game against Las Vegas. Probably played our worst game of the year, but at the time, it was a big blow to us. But I really think looking back on it, that's probably one of the most important games of the year, because I think it provide an opportunity for us all as an organization to look in the mirror and to really focus in on the small things and the details. And, sometimes that happens with a long schedule, and, these guys they emotionally and physically, they wear down a little bit. And every now and then, if you have experience like we did against Vegas on Christmas Day, it can go one of two ways. It can, maybe turn your season the wrong way, and things only get worse, or you can really, use it as an opportunity to look in the mirror and reach all that potential you have and really focus in. And so listen, some of those early drops and all that stuff, it was frustrating because, we put a high premium on excellence and playing our best week in and week out. But there was never a loss of confidence. And, we always knew that talent-wise, there's more than enough in this locker room to win games. It's just a matter of, being more consistent and, taking care of our own self-inflicted mistakes.
You've had really a great eye for talent during the course of your career. It's what's helped separate you from others. There are a couple of guys on this team that either you drafted or you signed on this particular team, and maybe under the radar, that you're particularly proud of because you saw something that maybe some others didn't?
Oh, that's a tough one because, you hate saying names and then you feel like you
you left somebody out.
Players out. But, look, I'm really proud of all these guys, and, we've been fortunate, and I got a great personnel staff and great coaching staff that supports us throughout the draft process here. But, we've been fortunate where a lot of these young guys that we bring in year in and year out are, have to step up and contribute. Obviously last year, with what Pacheco did in the postseason run, being a 7th-round pick. And, this year, a guy like Jamari Connor, we had a couple good safeties and Justin Reed and Brian Cook. We brought in Mike Edwards, 3 really good safeties. We had an injury to Brian Cook. He got hurt. And then, Jamari's been asked to step up and have a bigger role, and really proud of the way he's come along and has gotten better and better every week. But certainly to get where we want to go and hopefully to finish this thing off, it requires all hands on deck and all these guys, whether it's Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, or guys in the practice squad. I mean, they all have a big part in regards to why we are where we are, and just really proud of all of them for their work and their dedication.
Along the way, give me a name of a person or a couple of people that influenced how you saw things, how you looked at something, gave you a tip as to what you might be seeing, to then fit with your own personal instincts. Who influenced you?
Well, I mean, starts right at the top with certainly Coach Reed. I mean, blessing and just really good fortune to start my career with him and still work with him. But without question, Andy's been my biggest influence in being able to see the game through his eyes and not just the X's and O's, not just, roster composition, but really culture and character and, how that works on a day-to-day basis and how important that is. So, without question, Coach Reed is at the top of that list. And then, 2 guys that when I came to Kansas City took me in and coached me up, and that would be John Dorsey and Chris Ballard. I mean, those 2 guys, John coming from Green Bay and Chris coming from Chicago, super experienced guys. And, they helped coach me up in regards to just, running the show and, meetings and just the proper schedules and procedures just to keep everything organized and details and to not miss anything. So, I've been from Coach Williams at Mount Carmel to Tubby Raymond at Delaware to Andy Reid with the Eagles and the Chiefs, and then working with John and Chris, man, I have, benefited more from being around great people than anybody there is. So, never take that for granted. And, again, very lucky that I've had the opportunity to work with some really, really good people.
Yeah, no, and I could do the same thing in my career. I do a long list of people just like you can, which has been phenomenal. How difficult is the financial piece of this? Because it's such a puzzle. I mean, how much time is needed and put in by everybody in the organization to make it financially fit so you can put a competitive team on the field while also staying within structure?
Yeah, it's extremely hard. It's difficult, but, that's the beauty of the league. And, that's why the NFL is so popular, and that's why these games always come down to the end. I mean, the better you are, the more your players cost, and additionally, you're picking later in the draft every year. So it is set up for teams that don't have a ton of talent on their roster to go out there and get better players, and it's structured for teams to have high premium picks. And the more you win, the more disadvantaged you are in regards to the cap and your draft allocation. So it's a challenge. It's a puzzle, and it's basically just a series of contingency plans. And so you're going to have to work through the draft with the unknown of what's going to be there at 32, but you're also going to have to do a ton of work on the front end in free agency and find some guys that right off the bat you're going to be out of the market for a lot of these guys because you don't have the cap room, and you just got to do a ton of work. And so when the market doesn't materialize for certain players in certain positions, you have to be ready to jump on those guys and sign them right away. I think we did that last year when we didn't have a ton of room to work with, but especially after we signed the left tackle. But you're sitting there and you're doing a ton of work, and then when guys like Drew Tranquil become available and Mike Edwards become available, you have to be ready to go. So it's just a matter of just preparing a lot of different plans and being flexible and being able to be fluid throughout this process. And you can only do that if you put a ton of work in on the front end. And fortunately for us, we've got a great staff, and we do all that legwork so that when we run into those situations, we have these issues. We're not pigeonholed into, hey, this is the only shot we got. We try to leave as many different paths to get to where we want to go as possible. So just a lot of work on the front end.
Brett, I hope you don't mind one final question, then I'll let you go, because I know you have a series of these to do. When you do have success on a personal basis, I'm talking about personally, how much time do you give yourself to enjoy it before you know you're going to go back and start working on the next season?
Not enough time.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's funny because I think in my mind, when I was getting into this profession, and then you dream of being a GM, and then when you get that opportunity, I think in your mind there's always that subconscious thought that says, if I ever get to the Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, the rest is icing on the cake and it's all downhill. They can never take that away from me, that kind of mindset. And I have learned, and this is me personally, I don't know how others feel who have been down this road, but it's been the complete opposite, where the pressure and the stress only magnifies. And I know that the first time we played in the Super Bowl, it was an excitement feeling. Then last year there was more of an anxiety, and then this year it's worse than last year. So and I think the reason, Steve, is because before you win one, there's always that excitement of wanting to get there and experience it.
Right.
But when you actually win one, you realize it's better than you can ever imagine, and you know what it feels like. And so I think the pressure becomes more because you know what it's like to hold that trophy up. You know what it's like to see your family. You know what it's like to have that parade. And so then that puts more anxiety on you because you don't want to be without that feeling. So it's gotten more stressful over the years. So I think that the time to really take it all in and enjoy it will probably be way down the road somewhere when it's all said and done. But it's a nonstop schedule, and obviously we have the big game Sunday, and right from there you're in draft meetings, and then you're at the combine, and then you have OTAs, then you have a breather in June, and then you're right back at training camp in July. So it's a nonstop deal, and I don't think I've ever sat there and really enjoyed it like you should. Certainly have some periods throughout the course of the spring and summer where I try to take a step back and look, but there's always something going on. So I don't think you can really probably take it all in until everything's all said and done.
Well, congratulations on what you've done to this point. I wish you nothing but the best of luck, obviously, coming up. And you are such a credit to this area that I think everyone around here is proud. And we're just thrilled that you gave us a few minutes of your time today. Brett, thanks so much.
Awesome. Anytime, Steve. And hey, look, hopefully we can do this next year too, right?
That sounds great, because I like making it an annual event when we talk about Chiefs Kingdom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Ben, welcome back. It's so great to hear you again.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So I want to start with with the financial numbers that were put out. You took a long, hard look at it. Penn State brought in more money than ever, but it's also spent more in the athletic department. What was your general feel as to what you saw in the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it reflects the notion these days that if you want to win, you're going to have to spend more. I think the idea that, that winning is cheap, especially with inflation, that's not the case. And I think Penn State, you look across the board, I thought it was interesting. We talk a lot about the football numbers, the basketball numbers, some of those sports that are maybe top of mind for a lot more people. But you look at the money that Penn State spent on all of its other athletic areas, all of its different teams. It spent more money in that fiscal year across the board on each and every program. And I think, some years that's been the case for some programs, some years it hasn't been the case. But across the board, every program saw more money, and every program, except for one, I believe, brought in more money. So, when you tell people that Penn State spent more money, I think the natural question is to say, well, where's the biggest area? And the answer is pretty much everywhere. I mean, some of the main numbers, you can look at Penn State football's recruiting budget effectively, not technically, but basically doubled in that year and continues to go up. We should assume to see the same thing the next time that report comes out in terms of its growth. So it's really across the board. Penn State's obviously always in the business of hiring more administrators and more people to sort of run the ship, if you will. So it's not just one thing; it's everything. And I think that's sort of the direction that the intercollegiate athletics, for better or for worse, is headed.
It also should be pointed out that this is the last report that they'll put out under the old TV contract. The next report will include the new numbers from the current TV contract, which is backloaded, by the way, but it's going to include those numbers. How interested are you to see the escalation there on the media side of it that can make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge difference. I think if you're Pat Kraft, that's one of the great advantages that you have right now, that there's no question that he has probably the most aggressive infrastructure agenda that, a Penn State administrator or athletic director has really had. But at the same time, he's also working with more money than anybody before him has ever had. I think the fact that media rights deal kicks in, it's a lot of money that you go, okay, how do we want to use this? What's the best way to use it? Because you look at last year's report, the previously released one. Penn State had about $10 million extra dollars in the budget. It's not really a profit building, circumstance. They're not putting that away to just sort of sit on it for forever. This year it was a little over $100,000. But you add in all of that media rights money. It's a lot of things to work with, and you figure they're going to use it because you and I both know, certainly the process of financing Beaver Stadium's renovation, is going to come from a lot of different areas, but it ain't cheap, and everywhere that money can come in that they can send towards that and all their other departments and all their other teams is more money to work with, and that's good news for Penn State as it tries to tackle this agenda.
In fact, it's not just the Fox, CBS, NBC money that will now be a part of the mix. They also have the new contract with Playfly that will kick in beginning on June 1st as well. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm interested in what the total picture looks like. And maybe some of the spending that was done this year was in anticipation that they knew they could back it up with revenue coming up.
Yeah, there's no question. I look forward to hearing how many times it takes you before you get Playfly coming out of your mouth the right way, other than Learfield. But I don't know what kind of NDAs you have to sign at this point to make sure that doesn't happen. But in any case, I think there's no question that you've got to be strategic about how you spend their money. I think that's one of the interesting things when you look at these reports is there's a lot of information, but there's also sometimes there's not a ton of context, or you have to kind of dig into it to figure out what happened and why. But yeah, there's no question that some preemptive spending this year could be in part because things are coming down the pipes that aren't reflected into that report. There's no question that's definitely part of it. One of the example is Penn State it reports its giving, but only when it's used in terms of money that comes in through philanthropy. So there's always stuff in the works that we just don't know about until it hits the books, and when it hits the books is very often much different than when the pledge was made.
So there's not going to be a drinking game if I say Learfield, is there? I just want
somebody somewhere will be drinking. I think there's no question about that. But as to why, I'll leave that up to them.
Yes, exactly right. We'll find out. One of them I usually look at is the wrestling numbers. And the only reason I look at the wrestling numbers is because of the great respect all of us have for the program, and they sell out all the time. And I think to me, it's always the message to me is how difficult it is for an Olympic sport to make money if that one can't. I mean, because it's the platinum standard of sports. Do you take a good close at that one? Yeah, I know you look at all of them, but how close do you look at that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that it's a good example because I think a lot of people, when they talk about these numbers, and to answer a more immediate question, Penn State Wrestling made, I think it comes as no surprise, a lot of money last year in terms of the revenue that they brought in. But like you said, I think it's really a great example of how hard it is really for any athletic department across the country for these Olympic sports to be a cash positive endeavor. That, it costs a lot to turn on the money at Rec Hall. It costs a lot of money to run the show. It costs a lot of money to travel. And, obviously wrestling uniforms aren't exactly the most robust, but you've got to pay for equipment and things like that. And it has historically not been a cash positive venture. As you and I both know, it's pretty much just football and men's basketball. And that really just has to do with the fact that, football is obviously its own thing. Men's basketball gets a lot of help from its part of the media rights deal as well. And hockey has technically been a cash positive thing, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that they put the money for running Pagula in a different bucket in the budgetary things, but for all intents and purposes, it's not necessarily cash positive either. But yeah, wrestling is a great example. Sell out every duel, sell out every Jordan Center thing, sell out, everything they've got to sell. People will buy it. People will show up. It's great. And yet it's still a challenge to be cash positive. And I think that's part of the reason why Penn State football and its success is obviously so important and why so many athletic departments across the country, it's not that they don't care about these other sports. It's just that there's really only one or two that are really paying for everything. And that usually comes down to football and basketball.
And again, based on their numbers, I mean, it was a minus 800,000 this year. And over 2 years, in over 2 years, it's almost 2 million. And a lot of people find it hard to fathom that the platinum standard program that you can't find a ticket for is in that spot. But that tells you how important the media rights happen to be. It tells you how important the college football playoff distribution, how important that is. It tells you how important the NCAA men's basketball distribution happens to be. I mean, to me, that's what it outlines all, because the NCAA distribution, it's on the line there. It's right there as a line. For wrestling, it's $49,000.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an intricate puzzle. I don't think that I have the brain power to try and unpack tournament units and things like that they hand out after the tournament to different conferences for the success that they have. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult endeavor, and that's part of the reason why you've seen athletic departments across the country have to figure out how they're going to make it all work. And one of the reasons why Penn State's been so fortunate to be an athletic department that not only has as many programs as it does, but able to keep them. I think that's one of the things that's a different conversation altogether. But you look at some of the places like Alabama, Clemson, so those are two that come to mind off the top of my head, that they have significantly fewer athletic programs in total compared to Penn State. And when it comes to football, when it comes to facilities, when it comes to all of those things, that money's got to go somewhere. And that's been, feeding a lot of these programs and making sure that they stay afloat. And that's always been a point of pride for Penn State, probably something that always should be. But yeah, it's an intricate model. And, I remember telling Pat Chambers once when we were one of the first times they shot fireworks off at Beaver Stadium that went his entire recruiting budget. So it's a challenge out there to make it all work. And Penn State, to its credit, especially coming out of COVID-19, where that was hard for everybody, has figured a way to stand on both 2 feet.
All right, shifting gears, because it's great to have the opportunity to talk to you about such things. Penn State on football has had to replace all 3 coordinators along the way, with Stacy Collins ending up going to Boise State. Now Justin Lustig comes in to go with Andy Koltonicki, to go with Tom Allen. What's been your thought on the coordinators that were brought in, and what does it mean to a program when that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that, Penn State was afforded a lot of consistency and continuity over the years, and that's just not how, the world works anymore. I think if you're James Franklin, you go, did I get better? And, obviously, defensively, it's hard to imagine that Penn State defense could be better. That was not really the charge there. I think to replace, Manny Diaz is just a matter of finding someone who can grab a hold of those things and keep it in place. I think Tom Allen is a sensible hire for that. I think Andy Koltanicki has done a great job his entire career of, making the most of what he's got. And I think that was really, it's a different conversation, but I think one of Penn State's weaknesses this year was really in those big games going, so what exactly are we good at and how do we make the most of that? And I think that's really the charge now, is to do that and to answer that question. And I think, frankly, I think Stacey Collins is a nice guy. He did a really good job this year from, the special teams unit started out a little shaky and became, for the most part, really something that Penn State could lean on throughout the rest of the year. But I don't think a special teams is a sort of hire where you can really read the headline and go, wow, I'm impressed. And I actually think that Penn State made a hire that you go, you read this guy's resume, you see what he has done, you see the fact that, he's had that consistency throughout his career. You go, this is actually a good special teams hire. And I don't know how many times, and it's all due respect to special teams because no one cares about it until they do, that I think that, it says a lot about their ability to identify people that are going to fill their needs and do that. And, special teams is important. And if you can hire somebody in all three phases of the game that makes you feel like you got better or at least stayed the same, I think that there's no question that change is not ideal for any program, but I think that's the end result you're looking for.
How did you view the transfer portal pickups by Penn State? And I know this is a wide-ranging question, but also the fact that Devon Ellies, Akeem Beeman, Sal Wormley, Nick Dawkins, Keandre Lambert-Smith also opted to come back. How do you view that total package there?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day that Penn State has staked its claim in the idea that the best way to do this is to keep guys, to develop them, to recruit them, and then go into the portal and find guys that might answer your needs. And I think that the portal for Penn State has really sort of bear the truth that picking a guy up doesn't mean he's going to solve your problems. I think we saw Mitchell Tinsley, receiver, came right in, made a big impact on Penn State. Penn State would have loved to have had him this year. And then you look at Dante Cephas, who, for whatever reason, for a lot of different reasons, it didn't pan out the same way. And I think they were both pretty similar guys in the portal in terms of people wanting them, in terms of where they came from, in terms of what we thought they were going to be able to do. And you got two very different sorts of results. So I think that you look again, Julian Fleming, there's no question that's a guy that, Penn State has wanted for forever. It seems like, I think I made the joke that the recruiting department probably went into an old PDF file somewhere of Julian Fleming commitment things and then edited him to make him look older. That's a good pickup. But I think what you need to learn from the portal is you don't know what you've got until they're playing games that matter. And I think for Penn State, when it comes to keeping guys that are known commodities, you know what you're going to get out of Hakeem Beeman. You know what you're going to get out of Devon Ellies. And I think that we know Keandre Lambert-Smith can be a better player than he was at times this year. So to me, Lane Kiffin said it at one of the Peach Bowl press conferences that Penn State's one of the best programs at keeping guys out of the portal and really not having to shop there. And Ole Miss and Penn State have really been sort of opposite ends of that coin in terms of transfer portal acquisition. So to me, it's a good balance. And I think at the end of the day, the more guys that you can keep into your program for longer, the better off you're going to be. And Penn State was able to do that and then address some needs in the portal, and we'll just have to wait and see how they fit.
Yeah, in fact, Lane Kiffin was literally on the Alabama campus. You're allowed to do it. It's within the rules, but they have so many players in the portal. He was actually on campus wanting to talk with people. That aside, we'll get to that story in a little bit. Love talking basketball with you as well. You know your hoops as well as anybody. Penn State beat Wisconsin 87-83 on Tuesday night. Wisconsin came into the game ranked 11th. We all know it's been a roller coaster for this team to this point. What did you see that was a little different on Tuesday night?
Well, they made shots. I think that's, the great joy about basketball is, football can be this complex sport where you need a lot of things to go well, and sometimes it's just, you don't have the physical aptitude to blow somebody off the line. Basketball, anybody can throw that thing up, and it's going to go in regardless of a lot of different factors. And I think Penn State finished well at the rim. I think it shot well. It shot its free throws well. I think that it got back to really what has been Penn State basketball's MO through all of these head coaches as of late is really, maybe we're not more skilled than you, and that hasn't always been the case. Certainly recently, Penn State's been the better team, but independent of that, we're going to outwork you. And I think that we saw a Penn State team that, to their credit, through the ups and downs, through the frustrations and whatnot, came out and said, look, maybe we're not the better shooting team, and they turned out to be the better shooting team, but we're going to at least win more of these 50-50 balls. We're going to find ways to create turnovers. Ace Baldwin is, it changes every night, but at least in the top 10 in terms of steals per game. These guys are out there working hard, and there's been more than a few head coaches that have said the word attitude around that program, but I think attitude is certainly a good way to address or to sort of sum up what Penn State did well that night.
Let me ask you something. In your coverage of sports these days, football, basketball, what kind of role does analytics play in how you view sports today, if at all?
I think it's informative in a lot of ways because I think that the challenge is that I think sports makes you feel a lot of things in terms of, I feel like this team is not good at X, Y, or Z. And I think analytics gives you the ability to say, is that true? And go and sort of dive into the nitty-gritty of does what I feel match the data. Now, I think that, every coach and every player will tell you that, you can have paralysis by analysis. You can, there's tempo stats and all sorts of things that tell you X, Y, or Z about a team, and you don't really know what to do with that. But I think that it's a great tool at large to have to inform you of how do I feel and does that match the data? And for me, from the perspective of trying to tell people what I think happened and why it happened, I think it's really invaluable. But certainly I understand coaches and players that want to have not a safe distance, because I think it's a good tool, but a balance between, I think James Franklin has said that, what the numbers tell you and what your feel is in the moment of the game.
Ben, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time today. It's great to have you back on.
Yep, thanks for having me, Steve.